I think so. Oh, we're live. Look,
We've
been
live.
on for 2 seconds. We're live. So we've got Don from Don Drones On, isn't it? What is it? Droning
Don
On?
Drones On.
Don Drones On, yes. And we've got Jon Parker, a new guest, and Richard from Altitude Angel. And we've got Robert here. And we'll see what happens with Robert later. I've muted him because he's a bit echoey at the moment. So perhaps, John, you could introduce yourself because we don't see your face here very often at all before.
No, I'm Jon Parker. I'm the founder of Flyby Technology, the drone training company in the UK. And now we are the company running the Jackal project for the MOD.
That's it?
Yeah.
Oh, well, there's not much, is it? Do you have any thoughts on remote ID and things like that?
I think that my initial thoughts are we need something to get us going flying, and we will need some way of stopping ourselves from having collisions, of course. But it doesn't necessarily have to be 100% solution. You know, a number of 75% solutions are probably going to be needed anyway. And there isn't a 100% solution, so we shouldn't really be spending a lot of investor money going for it.
I think Richard from Altitude Angel will disagree, won't you, Richard?
Actually, no. I agree with everything you said. A 100% solution isn't right. Remote ID is not a 100% solution anyway. So whether or not it helps, I was going to jump in on John there and say, actually, whether or not it actually contributes towards getting us all flying more, I think is the topic of discussion or something to discuss anyway. But yeah, remote ID. I'm sure we'll be talking more about it.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, yes. So, but Canada doesn't have remote ID. There's no plans, is there, John? Is there, Don?
We have no remote ID. We have nothing on the books as far as an official proposal. There's no currently running task forces that are just talking about it. It's like everyone forgot.
That's a good thing. Should we see if we can bring Robert in here? I'll mute him and see if we can speak. No, it's Marcel Marceau. No voice, Robert. Robert, log out and then come back in and see if it works. Can't hear a thing. No one else hear him?
There's like little dribbles. Can you hear the little dribbles?
Yeah, I'm not sure. That might be echoes of something else. He's gone. Never mind. He'll be back.
Problem solved.
Excellent. So where's Gary this morning or this evening? He's nowhere to be seen. I guess the power's still off in South Africa. I don't know. Anyway, so yeah.
Feed the gerbils.
So Richard does what do you call it, Richard? It's not flight coordination, is it? It's what is it? What is your role?
Traffic management. Really.
Traffic management. Mm-hmm. Cool. So do you have these little lollipop sticks and things?
Yep, and fluorescent vests that we wear.
Excellent. So, and Don published a quite a good video recently on a follow-up, and the guy flew a drone at an airport somewhere, didn't he? And got into trouble. That was unusual. It's never happened before.
It doesn't make any sense that he got into trouble for flying at a place where airplanes fly. Why would that be an issue?
But he didn't get police level fines.
What was that, sir?
He didn't get police level fines, though, did he?
No, he got the regular Joe fines of 3,000 Canadian dollars, which is about $100 US. But yeah, quite an idiot. It looks to me, although it's nowhere as it said officially, that he tried to fly right at the airport, like literally in the parking lot of one of the maintenance buildings, and it looked like the DJI lockout caught him because he was in the red zone. So then he drove just outside the red zone and flew there just fine. But then he kept bonking his nose against the geofence. So yeah. So in the meantime, the Ottawa airport happens to be one of the places where they're doing a trial of drone detection. And I was like, wait a minute, there's something up against our camera. And it was his drone. And so they nailed him after a little fiddling around. But yeah.
I see Gary's in the chat. Hello, Gary. Why aren't you up here? Anyway, Robert, can you hear us? Can you talk now? Unmute yourself and say something.
I'm unmuted, and I hope you can hear me.
Yeah,
I
I
work
can hear you.
with the International Civil Aviation Organization. I'm working with a lot of civil aviation organization administrations in various places in the world. I work closely with the FAA. I'm talking with others. I'll tell you, remote ID is not for you. It's for them. It's for them to manage the space. And this is their best shot, and I think it's pretty bad to do. As we're finding out, they made a first attempt at it, and they did a poor job, and we're living with it.
Yep, the audio is almost good. We can make it most of it.
Yeah.
It's
So
like is your gain too high? I don't know what microphone you're using.
I have no control of it that I can find. Good old, Linux has everything but nothing. What?
Huh, okay. Are you working from a phone or from a computer?
I'm on a computer, so I switch to my phone.
Try your phone. Yeah, log out and then come back on your phone. That might be a better option.
Yeah.
And we'll
Oh boy.
come back.
Isn't technology wonderful? The things you can do. Oh, there we go. He'll be back. Yes. So yeah, I think he's going to have a bit of a chat with us about remote ID and his perspective on that, which is because it's the current topic, isn't it? Everyone's talking about it. It's time we stopped. But so what else? Where's Gary? Come on, Gary, hurry up.
Well, we're
Say
waiting
something.
for Gary. I'll tell you my exciting story of the weekend.
Oh yes. Okay.
I went skydiving for the first time. I was thrown out of a plane, unaware that this was what was going to happen. And some guy was trying to hump me from behind. Fortunately, he had a parachute. And it was absolutely stunningly fantastic. Way better than droning.
The assassins failed again. Damn. And what is the old joke? If at first you don't succeed, skydiving is not the sport for you.
There you go. Exactly.
That's the one.
Exactly.
Yep.
I did scream out RTH at one point, but
oh, there's a new Mavic drone out, isn't there? Was it an Air 3, is it?
yeah.
It's been announced, was it today or yesterday or something? Everyone's getting all excited. It's just a drone.
You know what's better than the Air 3 though is if you watch the video for the Air 3, that the DJI promo video.
Yeah. It's
the lifestyle that the couple on there live that they're filming. I mean, they go not skydiving. They go horseback riding, mountaineering. They're on horseback and running around, happily. They're on motorcycles like some sort of Tom Cruise movie. I want the lifestyle. Forget the drone. Leave the drone.
Aren't you doing? We're all doing that. What's wrong with you?
I have no horses to ride. So.
It's tragic, absolutely tragic. So I don't even know where to go with this today because I don't. I'll have to look at my notes. Oh, hang on.
I thought those fines were fair. I'm deeply swearing at SCOM for being late and enjoying Bruce winging it.
Yeah. Robert's back. Try
Robert's
this
back
time
again.
Can you hear me?
Oh, that's beautiful. That's perfect.
Woo.
Okay.
Right. Have your say, Robert.
I got too much going on my Linux system. I think that's the problem. Just too much working on it. I tried to shut down a few things, but it didn't help.
There you go.
So, as I said, remote ID is not for you. Remote ID is for the government. Remote ID is for them to try to manage the airspace. And they've done a poor job at it, in my opinion. But it is for safety for them and for the first responders on the airspace, not for you, the pilots, not for necessarily the people on the ground. I work with a number of the CAAs in the world. I work in ICAO. I work with people who have to manage the airspace, and they're looking at how air traffic control is going to expand to all these. The FAA estimates 1.4 million UAs in the air. Embry-Riddle says it's probably at least double that. They're scared. They're scared to death of this thing.
They're down in the sky. Hello, everyone. I'm late. belongs to us now. We're the majority. They're the minority. Get out of our lower airspace. Be gone. Are they the right? Hello there, Robert.
That's
Hello,
not the
John.
way the laws are written. You can say all you want, but the laws that
Not
set
yet.
them up,
Not yet. Just wait. Those with the most money will
at
win.
least in the U.S.,
Those with the money follow the money.
Yeah, the laws that authorize the FAA gives them control on anything which is flying in the air, not ground effect, from up in the air, like a foot off the ground, up to the top of civil aviation, wherever that is. They control the space over your lawn. They control the space over your roof. There's a debate about the space under the canopy of your trees, but that's the law. And how it's going to proceed, we have to make them smart, not to fight them. We have to make them smart so that we get what we want. We have to educate them. So that's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to educate them and make it better so that it works for what you people want to do. I'm not a pilot. I'm a data communications expert. I'm a security expert. And I've worked with regulators in different areas around the world. I'm really trying to help.
What do you see the biggest change? What's the biggest change, though, that you think is going to make the biggest difference for them?
Yeah. For some reason, my headphone...
It's just as well. It's only me talking.
Yeah, no one wants to listen.
So his microphone works, but now he can't hear.
I don't know. Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Yes,
right?
We can hear you. Yeah.
Yeah, the headphone is just not working. Let me just take that thing off.
Okay.
I'm a technologist, and if it's too long, the tech doesn't work.
No, that's fine. I think we all live in that world, really.
Yeah.
I'm very interested in you picked up. You actually responded to an article we had about the UK missing out on £15 million worth of that the CAA was seeking some funding and they didn't get the funding. We haven't actually got to the root of who they were asking, what they're asking it for, why and where. But you responded to that one, which interested me. You weren't asking for the 15 million, was it you? Were you asking for that?
No. I would love to have it, but I don't have it. No, I have friends in NATS. No, I work with the people in the IKO, in the Trust Framework Panel. So I'm working with people in NATS and say, hey, Bob, look at this thing that's going on over by us on our side of the pond. And I said, oh, no. So I've spoken to a couple of the people in your organization there about the remote ID and pointed out some things to them, and maybe they may do some relatively sane things. I'm trying to find out how we can put trust into this so they can gain what they want and not really get in the way of what you want to do. You know, much of this network remote ID, do you like that the only way you can do this is if you first register your mission before you can even start it? No. You're a photographer. You got to get that picture. You got to just toss that UA up in the air and get the picture. You don't have time to schedule an operation.
And you don't need it very high. I mean,
no.
But
Don's right. We need to stratify.
Here comes that UPS drone coming along, and you just tossed yours up in the air, and who dodges?
Oh, it's just let them duke it out. I mean, it's every man for himself. But I think we need to stratify things more. There should be at least up to 100 feet, which is no man's land, except for landing areas, where you don't need to, if you want to be free of other traffic, go to 101 feet or 102 feet. But below 100 and below, that could be a free-for-all, basically. Did you see Tridge's draft comment on remote ID in Australia?
Yeah.
That was good, wasn't it? He
And
did
I
very
think
cogent.
Oh, well, he would, wouldn't he? Dr. Tridge is always cogent. But I think Robert needs to learn one of the rules because, unfortunately, I think he's immediately straying into I think John knows this rule. He's talking common sense. And as we know, in the modern world, common sense is not not rewarded.
is rare.
Normally red card. Yeah, we
I've
red
worn
card,
my red card
common
out.
sense. We don't want
Yeah.
common sense in this world.
Okay.
So help me understand this here. You're in this world. You're sat in and you're the security part of this thing. How did you ever let some unencrypted and operator's position and get past? Can we blame you, Robert, or are we going to pin it on another donkey?
You can blame that I was brought late to the game.
Oh,
I
okay.
started in 19. A friend of mine said, Bob, I think I need you here. And they had already said, security is impossible to do. So we're just going to do without security. And I said, oh, yeah, let me show you how I will secure this. So I now have an RFC 9374, which says how we can do a secure remote ID, and a draft for drip auth to say how we will authenticate the messages. I'm showing how just with that Bluetooth 4 25 byte frame, what can be done? It can be done. The thing is, they never asked the real cryptographers. I'm not a cryptographer. I'm a crypto plumber. I talk to the real cryptographers, and we communicate well through the pipes. I know how to build this stuff, but we're like a handful of people. I will proudly say I'm one of a handful of people worldwide who know how to do this, and I've been doing this for 30 years. And I was only brought into the problem.
I think really the FAA and authorities around the world would be facing less pushback from the community if all of us want safety. Nobody in the community is against safety. We know that bad act. This is meaningless to say it's anything to do with the security part. Bad actors ain't going to play by these rules. But
Right.
in the open broadcasting of people's locations and the aircraft location has both a commercial value, if my opposition wants to see where I'm flying on the jobs, and a safety concern, which is really big because people are being attacked already when out flying their drones, and to come and get their expensive gear. If you want some expensive gear, why not broadcast where it is? you know.
I
Is
work
Kevin-
on the memorandum of compliance for the FAA that you can write. That's your declaration of compliance against. And in this discussion with the FAA clearly say we are a proxy for other agencies. And I have spoken with people in Switzerland about the EU regulations. And they say, this is not a violation of our privacy rules because this information is only visible for about a kilometer range. And I'm shaking my head on this. I have a document draft where I show how if you register your mission with your USS, how the information can be encrypted and only duly empowered, authorized individuals can get access to it. It's not hard. Any reasonable cryptographer can do this. I did it. I proposed how to do it. But they say, no, we can't do it. It's impossible. We want any police officer to know where you are. Of course, you gentlemen know the accuracy of GPS. So in that reporting, is that operator the one on the 4th floor balcony or the 5th floor balcony? You can't tell. It's the altitude information is bad. Oh, the debates we had with the FAA over that. So and also with the Eurocade people on it. I have no answer for you. I'm trying to make answers. Fight for it.
So has the FAA designed this to fail because it's been forced upon them by three-letter agencies? So they've made it the worst possible implementation they could to push back and say, well, we didn't want to do this, so we're going to make it so it doesn't work, and then you guys will have, egg on your face.
Yeah, and the wording in the MOC says that the interface, the vendor's interface will not allow the pilot to change certain data values. Right. But when you make your declaration of compliance, you just say that your software does not enable this. Right.
Seems pretty
So
dubious.
the situation we've got then is our little Bluetooth devices, but of course we're moving fast towards a network remote ID, which is really the goal. How do you see that playing out? And Richard he's a UTM owner. He's one of a rare breed. He's got a UTM, so he's going to have to talk to however that network works in the end. And is he going to do all that for free? Well, how's that going to work?
That's the thing. You're going well, if your for line of sight operation, if your GCS has internet connectivity, you can do it. So if it's your phone, which is your GCS, your phone contract gets you the internet access that then you have a contract with your USS for collecting your data. But if you want to do beyond line of sight operations, now you have to put a radio in your UA, which will interact. Now, in urban, that will mean some cellular card for urban use. Remote.
Let me just get this right in my head, because you have to say things slow to me. So, ground control station, easy, let's get busy. There's the internet. It's in your phone. Anything in the aircraft will have to have an LTE modem or something like that in it to communicate with a cell system independently to your GCS. So then they're getting your position from your GCS on the phone.
No,
the phone
you don't have to do. You don't have to do it. You if your line of sight, your GCS has all the information of your UA.
That's all you need. Yeah.
So your GCS is proxy for your UA.
Surely.
And that's all you need. But
So
if you don't have a...
Robert, sorry, the bit I've not understood is, where is that identity going? If I'm flying line of sight and my phone is a proxy, where is it ferrying that?
Beyond line of sight is where we say now that UA has to have some radio communicating with the internet.
I'm not talking about the radio, sorry. I'm talking about the first scenario you described, where you have a handset, presumably a GCS that's internet connected, the one you were just describing. And you said that that is communicating as a proxy. I'm curious, what is it a proxy to? Because Gary's original question was, who is going to pay for that integration? So I'm just curious how having a phone equals payment of the remote ID service you're describing.
Well, if your phone is busy receiving the broadcast remote ID messages, you can thus have through your account be the proxy from your phone, even though your hand controller does not have internet capability and your UA does not have internet capability. As long as your UA is sending those remote ID messages, your phone can then harvest those remote ID messages and act as the proxy to the USS to meet most sensible, there's a sensible, network remote ID regulations.
I don't understand why it has to be, why you differentiate between beyond visual line of sight and not. Yeah. Because if you're beyond visual line of sight, but you're still connected to a ground station, then why can't the ground station still be the proxy for the aircraft using the position information from the aircraft? Okay,
I should say beyond radio sight. So you might not be able to see your UA anymore, but you can still hear your UA. So what if you are at your UA
you were before you fixed your audio?
Yeah. Now, what if your UA
fixing, is how does that, so we're beyond visual line of sight. So how is this going to make it safer for manned aviation? How is manned aviation going to see my BV loss track? Jon teaches BV loss courses, his company does, around the world. So he's got an interest in BV loss. How is that? Why isn't ADSB good enough for that BV loss piece?
Too expensive, too much power. ADSB is too expensive, too much power. Not enough bandwidth, not enough bearing capacity. Too small messages. I can go
okay.
I have not seen a single, and the address space, there's only 24 bits with which to identify the aircraft. So it's just not big enough to do it. Everybody says ADS-B looks nice. Forget that. Drop that conversation. ADS-B is not an option for anything other than the large, long-distance cargo UAs.
You'll be fine for that. Yeah.
But if you're doing if you want to be a pizza delivery service, and you want your pizza drones to be able to fly away from your pizza place, out of sight of your pizza store, you're going to have to put a cellular card in that UA.
Okay, so that's going in the UA. So we are visual line of sight, but we're still going to pay for that service, but it's coming from our ground control station. We go BLOS. We've got an independent network card in the machine. In fact, British Telecom in the UK actually has a SIM card for that very purpose, and we pay that way. Is that the Robert is part of the DRIP remote ID working group at ICAO, and he's a grown up. As you we have two
Internet Engineering Task Force, the people who brought you this internet. I've been working in it for 30 years in the Internet Engineering Task Force. And so I've done a lot of work in there in other areas in communications. You can thank or blame me. It depends on which side of the debate you're on. And
so how far out do you think is network remote ID in the US then?
I don't see it for 2 years. I mean, we don't even have a proposed rule. Without a proposed rule, you're talking 2 years.
Yeah, no, for sure. It's a thorny subject, and as I say, it's raised the eye. I don't know. Otherwise, you other guys must jump in. Don't let me do all the talking. Just the very act of rebroadcasting people's position. I'm a bit bemused as to why we need, if we can get away with just our phone for the network thing, why do we all need to put Bluetooth devices and everything now? I'm a bit bemused as to why that's going to happen. Again,
that was for the first responders. That is for those the firemen in small rural places that all they have are old phones that only have Bluetooth 4. That is where that got into the regulation. That is not for you. That's for them.
Okay, so did anybody actually assess the size of the problem properly before putting such a big burden on a community of perhaps, I know it's not your fault, but let's say the flight test community, that's 2 million people. So that's quite a burden without doing a proper risk assessment.
The FAA got 20,000 comments on their proposed rules that they had to sort through on that. But for good or for bad, they did not cut out the Bluetooth 4 requirement. And I've gotten things to work in Bluetooth 4 I've shown that it can be done. It's hard, but we do it. And that's why, and so it's like, it's an or condition, either Bluetooth or Wi-Fi.
Yeah.
It is an or. Yeah. As long as you have Wi-Fi, you can send the Wi-Fi beacons with your remote ID information. You don't have to add Bluetooth. That is at least in the U.S. regulations. It is an or condition.
Well, I know you say you're speaking to the guys in the UK. I truly hope the UK is watching hard and is going to implement a system that will be suitable for 50 years' time, not for now and driven panic, because I feel a lot of this is driven by panic. Now, John, in a previous life, had a lot of reason to worry about drones at low level because he was tooling around at low level at 420 knots or 500 knots in a fast jet. I'm now in rant mode. But I know some of the RAF fleets later on start having FLARM-fitted electronic conspicuity receivers in some of the fleet for the gliding community in Yorkshire and in the lakes and stuff. And I'm against all these devices that have no big safety impact on the overall air picture. It's all very well that other people want to know about where drones are and that sort of thing. But come on, let's get manned aviation up to the same level of requirements as well before we start.
We are working on tactical detect and avoid. We're working on how we'll get air-to-air broadcast communications working such that each one can say, oh, there's somebody, I can tell by this data that we have potential conflict in the airspace. How can we avoid it? That work is going on now. We're working on how to do this. We're learning from what the auto industry has done for collision avoidance on the ground, but we have to solve it three-dimensionally, and how to add such things as like, I'm out of battery. I'm not the one who's going to dodge. You got to dodge instead. So those sorts of things.
Well, quite handily, that's exactly what Richard's done. Richard's done this. He's worked this one out. The two Parkers, it's the Parker twins. Richard has worked this one out. And that's you've just announced your what's your lower airspace watching thing name? I should have remembered.
So we have the Arrow system, which is a series of coordinated ground infrastructure above which effectively and around which we direct aircraft that want to be on visual line of sight automated service. There is no particular equipage requirements for drones in that area. The GA operating in the vicinity also don't need to change anything, carry anything. The towers operate in a way which allows us to detect the presence of low altitude aircraft. Principally GA, that's principally what they're focused on, but we are increasingly equipping those towers with software-defined radio systems as well, which allow us to create a profile to hunt, if you like, for specific broadcasts in a range of different frequencies, including popular ASTM-style remote ID broadcast frequencies, etc. So that allows us to kind of grab information that's being freely offered and broadcast, and we use that to compute a surveillance picture in real time. So most of the systems that are on those towers are passive systems, and that's to help keep the cost of them low. It's to help effectively allow them to be rolled out quickly, because it's particularly in the UK, but widely across Europe, spectrum is a particularly protected asset. So applying to do great things with radars is really difficult. And radars are really good at certain things, but really terrible at the things they weren't designed for. So they're not necessarily the best way of helping to image that. So yeah, we have a great reception capability and know all about the fun that you tend to pick up that isn't necessarily intended to be broadcast, but is a poor transmission or a missed transmission. And curious, you mentioned ADS-B, one of its flaws being too powerful. It has many flaws, one of which is definitely too powerful. But at low altitude, if you're emitting ADS-B at a very low altitude, your chances of being picked up on anything is also particularly quite difficult too. So we've had to optimize specifically for low altitude radio frequency reception, etc., which is another challenge. It'd be different if we were working in the Netherlands, where everything is nice and flat, but we don't. We live in the UK, and it's very not flat. So yeah, it's an interesting.
So if I could summarize your solution to remotely piloted aircraft UTM is to have a vast network of antennas that listen and somehow aggregate that information into a centralized or maybe decentralized system to pinpoint where all these little bits and pieces are flying around in the airspace. And
no, not really. Just to correct you, the towers aren't looking for drones. The towers are looking for aircraft.
Okay, but they're capable of picking up the drone if it has something
Yeah.
on.
And the principle for the towers is we want to capture and see as much as we possibly can in the low altitude sky, but the very minimum bar to hit is that of a spotter on the ground piloting an unmanned aircraft, visual line of sight. Towers have to perform at a level equal to or greater than that person for deconfliction purposes. So yeah, we will receive broadcast transmissions from aircraft. Mode S is a good example. We'll pick up ADS-B for sure. And if you happen to be broadcasting one of the known kind of drafts, sort of remote ID local broadcast standards, we'll pick that up too. And we will use that information to then make a determination about how to control a vehicle that does want an automated navigation service on the way. So we kind of leave the control of the drone and the mechanism for how you want your GCS or your drone itself to talk to the UTM down to the implementer. We have folks that use cellular. We have folks that are experimenting with Starlink. We have folks that are
for whatever reason, my phone dropped me.
Long range radio. Welcome back, Robert. So yeah, we have a lot of different flexibility baked in. But that was the point really of that navigation system, was that it wouldn't require particular equipment from individuals beyond what the regulator wants to see for usually redundancy. If you're flying anything large and heavy, or you're trying to go over a populous area, you're probably not going to get a permission to fly only with a single sort of transmission control mechanism. So it'd probably be cellular with a satellite backup, or it might be a ground-based radio with a cellular backup, something like that. And then to answer your other question, in terms of quantity, no, our absolute solution is not to cover every country in millions and millions of towers. As it happens, we can cover a very large area with a very small number of towers. But it would be, in many instances, better if we could rely on broadcast signals to identify where other users of the airspace are. Obviously, we cannot do that. And even if there was a law that said that you could, in my discussions with virtually every NAA on the planet, the mere reliance of a received broadcast signal alone is not enough to underwrite liability if we were to say, well, hang on, yeah, we did crash one of our drones into that plane, but we didn't receive the signal. That's not good enough, right? So we still need some other way of dealing with this. So the goal is not to have these things covering 100% of the landmass. The goal is to use these things to mimic the early advent of aviation, where you had routes and aerial ways, where you could, even today, you can put these things as a navigation warning on an aviation chart to let other aviators know that there is increased UA traffic, and ideally BVLOS automated UA traffic in that zone. So there's no other way, really. When we've done loads of research, we've done lots of simulation, you cannot rely only on a broadcast in the same way you cannot rely only on a visual lock. Safety is a combination of different systems and aggregation, and really that's what the towers are. They help to aggregate data from the real world out in a specific geography with other information flowing through the kind of surveillance platform that we have. So, Robert's sort of crowdsourced, I guess, on one end, radio broadcast, which are then proxied somewhere. We would probably be a proxy for that, where we receive that information and we add that to that surveillance stream. And then it's up to our tools to make decisions based off of that, really.
Yeah.
Whether it trusts it, whether or not it doesn't, etc.
And that is so important, Richard. What you're doing is how we're going to get some of this stuff working short term, near term. But again, in terms of a lot of work going on point to point, air to air communication with tactical decisions being able to be made. But the backup to have the harvesting, to be able to have the people on the ground and the rest know what's up in the air is critical for the whole picture.
Yeah, I
good
mean,
for
I
you.
guess the thing that we find really interesting is people that rely on air-to-air communication working for deconfliction suddenly forget the principles that if ADS-B or another transponder doesn't work at low altitude, why on earth will a potentially high fidelity, high bandwidth tactical conflict situation involving multiple UA, why will that work at 60 feet above the ground when another signal won't. And then equally, the other problem that we tend to have is, although the standard can be well described and can cater for everything, you're no longer talking to Boeing or to Airbus. You're talking to brand new drone manufacturer X, who's only got $100,000 to its name. So you're now reliant on every single participant to get that, to nail that standard. And then also when there is a revision in that standard, to nail that too. And we haven't yet found a regulator that's comfortable, again, to underwrite that. So I agree, certainly the Arrow system we see it as a transition system, but a transition for how long, I think, will remain to be seen, because until there is a sort of a guarantee where you can provide a regulator with confidence that they can actually set rules that people will follow, because the machines, the highway systems that are powering them will enforce those rules for them, rather than sort of bidding them to the lowest common denominator. It's really difficult to imagine that future where, you could just have two UAS companies operating in the same vicinity, right? That aren't necessarily directly talking to each other on the ground, but all these great life-saving ideas for like medical companies just can't, this stuff can't take flight until they have confidence that this is going to work.
Well, unfortunately, the regulators have been, in my view, is that they've been put into fear by certain big operators, including the big incumbents, who wanted to slow everything down. If 5, 10, even 10 years ago, we'd started doing some deliveries at scale, the data the evidence would be in, and that it's really quite safe. and large players have allowed this to slow right down, because they're trying to catch up. Boeing and Airbus are trying to be in this space, and they're failing. They are. Look at Amazon; they have failed, and they will continue to fail because they're rubbish. But they're not innovative enough. Now, John's got a platform that's large, and it could be in the national airspace now, flying and working. Okay, it's got a bit. The Jackal's got a shooty bit, so that's not the same. That's not the same platform, really. But I think, John, delivery was your original goal in life, wasn't it? That could have been up and running. That you did the trials for the NHS during COVID, but that was only because there was nothing else in the sky. Is that about right?
Well, that was Skylift. They were the guys that did the actual trial. We were supporting them in the early days of that trial, and Altitude Angel was part of that as well. The problem that I see at the moment is that the UK industry, the drone industry, is stillborn. It just hasn't got going. And it hasn't got going because we've had too few rules at the right time and the wrong rules at the wrong time. And those rules have held back innovation. There's not been the right money. The money's been invested in the wrong way. eVTOL seems to soak up most of the competent investors, and then they run out of money before they go to the stuff that could have been flying as innovative test vehicles. You should crawl, walk, run, not do one straight leap straight to eVTOL. So to my mind, I'm on Richard's side. I think there should be not necessarily remote ID, but a collision avoidance system and an unmanned traffic management system. However, as we both agree, it will never be 100%. It doesn't work in the low block very well. Technology is evolving for aircraft to do non-cooperative collision avoidance, prioritization of a number of collisions at the same time. What if you're transiting and the red arrows go by? Which of them do you avoid? Well, actually, you avoid the one that's going to collide with you. The other thing that we're starting to get confused about is that people keep worrying about air proxies. We're not worried about air prox. You've bought the air prox. That's happened. All you've got to do is not swap paint.
Yes.
You might frighten somebody. You might have an incident that's going to be in the press, but the important thing is no smoking hole in the ground for some vehicle with people in it. Who cares about the drone? Who cares if two drones hit each other? I don't care. Now, there is, of course, a third-party risk, which we have to worry about, and that can be taken care of with flight planning, low velocities, ballistic recovery systems. But having flown around at low level a lot, drones are just another risk to fighters and combat helicopters.
Another bird.
They're not anything special. Don't overrate the risk just because, Balpa did a trial and weighted up the drone so that it would make damage. Let's not worry about that. There's going to be damage, but it's just another risk. Fighter pilots and helicopter pilots have already signed up to that. This is just another day in the office with a few more drones about. My concern is that we start. I've gone on for quite a while here. I'm sorry.
That's all right. You carry on. It's fine. You're risking a red card, mind. You are risking a red card.
Well, my concern is that the UK drone industry really needs an accelerator. Now, if that accelerator is a UTM, I'll take it all day. But if the UTM is another means to slow progress, then we need a different answer. Now, lots of overlapping 75%, 40% solutions are cool. We will never get to 100% safety. And let's not forget, we haven't got anybody pink and fluffy sitting in our aeroplanes until we start doing casualty moving and eVTOL. When we get there, then the story's different. And this will have been the pipe cleaner to get to that. So if the British industry is to recover, we need regulation that allows us to fly, courage of those that can say yes to actually do so. And for the regulators, both regulators at both sides of the camp, civil and military, to help companies get flying. Because unless we get flying, every other country will be ahead of us. And once you're behind in drones, you're staying behind.
Well, America's started behind. It's still behind.
Yeah, and it's
very behind.
Technology like what Richard has, that deployed in the geofenced areas. Why do we have geofenced? Because they're scared. And they're real risks.
DJI said so. No, it's because DJI said so. That's why.
It's always safe to lead from behind. All the good generals lead from behind. You don't get so good.
Yeah. But actually, if you get the intelligence to be able to monitor those areas properly and be able to do attention where there are true risks, then you can start changing the picture. What Richard has to offer, that in the critical physical geological areas, let much the rest of it go with just simplifying remote ID, adding a few other things to it, some smarts to it. You can probably get there, gentlemen.
It's interesting. John made a good comment on the low level stuff's hard to manage. And I want to know, what do we do with the hobby? I mean, we're talking about larger UAS and, delivery drones, eVTOLs and so forth, but does the hobby still have a place? And if so, what do we kill the hobby to enable all this commercial activity? Because the analogy I usually draw is that we have, when we have a look at transport, just moving around, we have cars. We put them on a freeway, on a motorway, on a road where they are constrained as to where they can go and so forth. They can turn off into houses where they cross a footpath. Now, the footpath is where the pedestrians go. So we don't have integration of pedestrians into wheeled traffic. We have a segregation. And I hate it when all of the regulators say we want to integrate UAS into the airspace. I always say, you want to segregate them. You want some kind of separation. Then your traffic management woes are a lot less. You only have to worry about drones hitting drones. And if two drones collide, at this stage, that's not an issue because we don't actually have eVTOLs. So what I'm wondering is, and you were saying how the low-level stuff, can't we just carve a layer out for non-managed unmanned traffic, which may be 0 to 80 feet, 0 to 100 feet or whatever, which enables the hobby to continue operating. It gives safety to the commercial craft, which will operate above that. And what happens to manned aviation? When are we going to see changes to regulation affecting manned aviation to recognize the changing risk profile of the lower altitude limits?
We're making a mistake there straight away because we're saying manned and unmanned aviation. It's not. It's aviation. And we all fly in the same air. And if we keep talking about unmanned and manned, we will forever be in a category that's subservient to manned. That's not really where the future of aviation is going. I disagree with that,
John.
Sorry?
I really disagree with that.
Okay.
Carrying on from Bruce's analogy, we don't call everybody a truck. or a lorry. Sorry, you know, we don't say, oh well, there's the little lorries that are wobbling around, you know, on two legs, and then there's the big ones. But you know, we say, okay, there's trucks because we know they are different, and there are people or kids on trikes.
They're all drivers and they're all in vehicles. I mean, when does it stop?
But they don't have the same risk. They don't have the same control capabilities or anything. So you only have to worry where they come into contact or into conflict, like crossing the sidewalk.
I think we're holding ourselves back with that way of thinking. Drones are the next step in the aviation evolution. It's like manned aviation in the military. You know, it happened for 100 years, 120 years. People are already being designed out of those. So manned aviation was a blink in aviation. It was the first blink. The future of aviation is aviation. It's manned, unmanned, and whatever else comes after that. We've just scratched the surface of the technology in the last 100 years. Remember, the genome's 250,000 years old. We've been here a blink as aviators. This is the start, and unmanned flying and autonomous vehicles are the start of the next chapter in the aviation history. If we stop and categorize ourselves as a subcategory of aviation, we'll be held down. I
don't think so. I disagree.
No, I agree. No, I'll agree with John, but we are being held down because the regulators are already the regulators doing that. We should have. So let's take the guy that is attacked operating. Many people have been attacked in their field operating their hobby drones now, and not one. And that is, on one hand, the regulator wants us to be an aircraft and comply with aviation rules. And one of those rules is you shall not interfere with the pilot or an operator of an aircraft. No, I believe no authority in the world has yet invoked that regulation for someone that's attacked somebody flying a drone. So you can't have it both ways. But I agree with you, John. It would be not. But I think the regulators have already put us in the naughty corner.
I'm on Don's side. I disagree because you say that. You say we should all be treated the same, but if we take that analogy back, for a long time, people all you could do was walk, apart from horses. So you walked on a path or a road. When automobiles came along, you didn't say, well, they're just another form of transport. We'll stick them on the footpath along with the people. We said they are a different form of transport. We need to provide them with their own area to operate in because their risk profile is dramatically different. And we did that segregation thing. And we're doing it to a degree already. We're saying that unmanned, like hobbycraft, up to 400 feet in most countries, manned aviation down to 500 feet in most countries. We're doing the vertical stratification. And it's proven to be pretty effective because there have been so few actual evidenced instances of model aircraft colliding with aircraft or whatever. Usually it's a shopping bag that they run into. So I don't see why we need to have this integration. And you say this is just manned aviation is just a blip. There'll always be manned aviation, even if it's just recreational. People love getting something and hurl themselves around with a few G-forces. And so I don't want to see the situation where we treat every unmanned aircraft as the same as a manned aircraft, because it means the 8-year-old kid will never be able to fly because you can't get a pilot's license.
That's not what I was trying to say, actually. It was how we are treated within the industry. If we always put ourselves in an inferior subcategory of aviation, we'll be treated as such.
Yeah.
And we follow the same principles and we operate to the same standards, then we're able to have those conversations with manned aviation pilots, looking them straight in the eye, level, and we can then adapt to their we can cover their worries, their fears, and we can then adapt to their needs and their risk profiles, and also show them that we're safe. But if we're always in an amateurish category, that's never going to happen. And I would also say, Bruce, that it's very important that we have hobbyists. It's vital that we have hobby flying. Hobby drone flying is where all pilots will start. Even when we go to autonomy, there'll still be pilots and there'll still be people that are programming, following those principles, and those people will have been interested and aviation minded with venture and adventure the same way all of us are. So we love our hobby. The problem that we've had now in the UK is that hobbyists, God bless them, are now able to work commercially without training, meaningful training. And that, to my mind, has cheapened off the status and has kept us in this hiatus where we can't get to professional standards because the chasm between the low-level commercial operator and those required to fly BVLOS is too big a step to stride over. So to my mind, yes, have A2 CFC, yes, have hobbyists, but no, you can't do commercial operations until you have done some meaningful training, that you're operating to a set of procedures and processes that are recognizable by the regulator as safe. And that allows you then to move on. I mean, aeroplanes have been dumbed down. ATI mode has been taken away from most of the DJI products. That was a very vital mode for training and also for flying in very strong winds or when you're operating in built-up areas. You will go GPS austere or GPS denied in built-up areas. Now you've got people with A2 CFCs, with aeroplanes that they've never been able to practice without GPS, suddenly losing GPS and saying the aeroplane flew away. It didn't.
Yeah.
You weren't trained.
Blew away. It blew away. Yes.
Yeah.
So how do we protect the hobby, though, in an era where in the UK you've got to be 18 to get a operator ID, in the USA you've got to be 13 to be able to register? They're basically legislating children out of the loop unless they have an adult to sponsor them, and that's not always available. I
agree. You can fly. I think you should be able to fly from a very young age, supervised until a certain age, and then but supervised by a responsible adult, not by a trained responsible adult. The hobby.
You fly under quarter kilogram. If you're flying under a quarter kilogram.
Yeah, but even a 250-gram craft are nowhere near as, if you've got a bit of wind, they don't handle it as well, especially with, and we're talking fixed wing here, someone buys a little foam model of a Piper Cub, goes out there. I fail to understand why regulators have said this foam model of a Piper Cub with rudder elevator and throttle control is just the same risk profile as this DJI M300 or whatever. Why don't they stratify the risk? It's like they haven't done the risk assessment. They're saying everything is the same. This tiny little drone is the same as this great big drone. Same rules apply. Why do we have this? Is it ignorance? Is it that they want the total control, which means that anything that flies they want to have control of, even when they openly acknowledge that the traditional hobby of going out and flying a model airplane in a grassy field somewhere has never been an issue to aviation safety or security?
I think society's changed. I think people are just so unable to take a risk. How people put their trousers on in the morning is beyond me some days. Life is a risk-taking exercise. And if you don't take risks, you'll live a boring life. But sadly, we're being told to live boring lives, and we shouldn't. Aviation. Sorry.
Chris Crockford's in the comments, and he should never be allowed to fly over Morecambe Bay. I completely agree with the CAA in that regard. But there's a case in point. He's got a great proposed trial in Morecambe Bay. That's across mud. It's across mud, basically, from one side to the other. That should be over and done with, and we should all be reading the report of what happened now. There was no reason to slow that down. There's no reason to have it's not temporary danger areas, whatever it is they call them anyway. Yeah. There's no reason to do that at all. Just crack on and do it. The regulator should be able to take a little bit of that risk.
How do I employ pilots if I have to take 6 months to apply for a TDA, which will run for 3 months? How do I train a pilot, then employ them, and then if I wanted extending, it's only in that geographical area. There might not be a commercial opportunity there after the 3 months. The whole thing just doesn't work. So the quicker Richard can get his system together and get us flying commercially and viably, the better. But remembering that you're always going to buy the air props. The air props is going to happen if you're using this sort of system. You've just got to get used to that. There will be near misses, but you've only got to avoid the collision, and collisions are easy to avoid. They're very hard to set up, believe it or not, because I've tried to do it a number of times. They are incredibly hard to set up. They happen really easily by accident, though.
Well, you need to have a tree as one of the other. You need to have a tree as one of the other vehicles. Then you're okay.
That's magnetism.
You'll always get the tree. Yeah, you'll always get the tree.
Yeah.
Just jump in on the safety piece. I think is really, really key, right? Safety and risk are closely linked, particularly in the regulator's mind. I think at some point, somebody somewhere popular decided that unmanned aircraft particularly have some extra risk associated with them, albeit unquantified at that point. But then what happened was someone decided that aviation, particularly for unmanned aircraft, almost exclusively for unmanned aircraft, should be about the exclusion of all risk. And manned aviation has never been about that. Right? No one in the right mind would ever fly a plane if they thought it was zero risk. It can't get to zero risk is the point we're making. So we tolerate risk in our aviation system on actually quite an astronomical scale on a daily basis. And actually one of the interesting experiments we're looking forward to doing sort of September timeframe in the UK is we'll have 32 of these towers right across the heartlands of the UK. And for a while, those systems will be doing nothing other than looking up at GA. And what we're looking to do there is to try and capture some quantitative evidence for the aviation authority to say, well, look how many air proxies, look how many other incidents, look how many incursions into controlled airspace we see on a regular basis from people who are properly authorized, licensed, trained, skilled pilots with actual skin in the game, right? So our goal there is not to turn around and say, well, actually, because of that, drones should be able to do anything. But at the moment, we see a lot of assumptions. They tend to be quite negatively weighted. And usually the argument for that is, well, because we don't know, we need to take an abundance of caution. It's not really how aviation ever got off the ground, was it? No one knew what was going to happen the first time that people started to fly. It seemed like a terrible idea at the time to everyone else that was observing. But to take the view that we should actually have this artificial separation between manned and unmanned aviation, I want to agree with Jon on this. I do see your point, Don, very, very well. But I think from Jon's perspective, the future of aviation is automation, right? And actually, if you go speak to Boeing, you go speak to Airbus, for a large proportion of the flight, those aircraft are automated, right? And they would like nothing more than to be able to make all flight completely automated. So,
but here's where
it's a matter of scale. You're talking about, maybe how many hundreds of GAs in an area versus how many thousands of UAs. So probability tells you that scale is important.
I think, Robert, I think those numbers are. Sorry, Jon.
At the same time, I get all that, and I understand. Yes, we're all in aviation and all that. I understand the notion that we have to be able to talk. We need to be able to discuss these various options. That looks scary. But here's the thing. I mean, the government, as opposed to any of us, wants to keep careful track and remote ID and promiscuity.
Yes, please. Yeah, hang on. Where's the form? Let me find
the drone is distracting you, isn't it, Don?
Let me just
I want that form.
You want to do all this stuff with drones and RC aircraft in the order of 1 kilo, plus or minus around 1 kilo. But there's 1,000, maybe 1 million times more birds in the sky than that, and there always hopefully there always will be. So I mean, we've got to design a system that can tolerate a few drones that are in the recreational class, I'll say, that are minding their own business. Ideally, their owners are wanting to protect their drone. They don't want to lose it. So if they see something coming by, they're going to land.
I think here's where we can definitely agree. I think certainly on a hobbyist scale, our view is that with the presence of something like the Skyway system we're building, hobbyists just crack on. You know, if it's unsegregated airspace, uncontrolled airspace, or otherwise rules permit, just go fly, right? And people that want an autonomous service, one that takes them beyond line of sight, can subscribe to that service, but that service needs to move out of everybody else's way, right? So the way that, it's a terrible metaphor, but it's the only one I've ever been able to find. Imagine a highway with, you know, multiple lanes of traffic in each direction, and then a pedestrian walks out onto it today. Typically what happens is probably just one of two outcomes, right? One, pedestrian dies very quickly, or two, traffic stops. Hopefully two. The third thing, which generally never happens, is the highway doesn't reconfigure itself to move around the pedestrian approaching, right? And that's the equivalent, effectively, what the Skyway system is doing with that detection. So I agree, you know, other airspace users, whether it is hobbyists, but actually in Skyway parlance, also GA, which is not particularly cooperative with the Skyway system, just crack on, right? It's a new classification of traffic. It's a new transport mechanism, and it's incumbent on that transport mechanism to do it safely. I agree with that from the regulator's perspective. I think the challenge you've got, though, and coming back to this segregation piece in terms of manned versus unmanned, is you've got a whole worldwide institution of aviation regulation, which principally puts the squishy organic thing in the cockpit at the center of the universe, right? So all of the instruments that are enshrined in law, all of the regulatory studies, all of the legislation that exists is focused on that as the gold standard. And of course, drones are changing that. Drones are closer to the ground, potentially able to do incredible things, hundreds of vehicles operating in a swarm formation, which GA couldn't achieve, or even military, you know, in many respects couldn't achieve that kind of scale. So it's pushing for, or it's pushing on what we'd say as an open nerve or raw nerve, right? It's exposing weaknesses in those procedural systems that have kept everyone safe for so long. So I think what we're missing is an opportunity to take the learnings of, you know, decades and decades of safe aviation and use technology to transform that going forwards. Rather than today, what we do is we see the safety situation that's gone before, and we see technology as the immediate and obvious risk, and therefore we push for that segregation. We put drones in temporary danger areas, or we make people like Jon, you know, have to go through millions of hoops to be ultimately, albeit you're allowed to fire, Jon, but you're chained to that location, right? You are anchored there. You don't get the same right as a qualified helicopter pilot. You can't just go bimble around London for the day and then bimble up in Scotland the next day. That's crazy. So that, I think, is the opportunity here, is to show how this technology can still respect all of that safety, but it can still allow for the stepping stone. And the final piece I'll say, because I'm on my high horse now, it's obviously catching, Jon. Yeah, I think it's really important. Coming back, people express this different ways. One I hear a lot is we just need more flying, right? And I think you said it too, Jon, right? You know, if you fall behind in the flying race, you fall behind, period. What's needed is a way for a regulator to get comfortable that this stuff can happen alongside traditional aviation today, and particularly in a location. If we can enable that, we can enable flights at scale. Then we can collect data, and then we can make some informed regulatory decisions and some policy decisions. So that's the dream. But worry that might be too sensible.
Well, that's all the way back round to crawl, walk, run, though, isn't it? And we've as Jon's alluded to, we're trying to leap to run. Let's go urban air mobility. Let's run headlong into that. And we've had 10. I'll say 13 years. 2010, fantastic year for dronology in the UK and the CAA. And in the last 13 years, it's only gone backwards. Things have not improved; they've gone backwards. I'll say that. And that. Sorry, Gary. I just thought. There's a fun fact, right? This is an interesting fact. You can go do your own research. I encourage everyone to do their own research. Don't just listen to things from random people, especially with ginger hair on the internet. But since 2021, $5.2 billion of VC money, investment money, has gone into drones.
But that 5.2 billion represents 80% of all the money that's gone into drones. So that 5.2 billion, that 80% has gone into hardware. It's gone into eVTOLs. It's gone into new airframes, right? It's not gone into software and infrastructure and process improvement, either in traditional aviation, in air traffic control, or in new UTM style systems. It's the sexy piece, right? It's the cool new car. It's the cool new aircraft that's attracting investors. But what we're starting to see, and I think what's being reflected a little bit more now, is we've had a couple of years of investment at an off the chart scale, making brand new promised automated transport for people. But actually all they are right now is electric helicopters, right? And that in and of itself is a cool thing, right? Let's be really honest, having clean, green electric propulsion helicopters is really, really cool. But that's not how many of these companies raise their money, right? Raise their capital. The promises were millions of these things flying around in an automated fashion, ferrying people, keeping the cost per flight low. So something's got to change, right? And that interim step has got to happen in order to unlock that existing investment first and foremost, let alone what you or I want to do with commercial drones around Coventry or somewhere in the interim.
You're absolutely right, Richard. The investment is in the Gucci kit, and the Gucci kit has not been in UK drones.
Yeah.
That's very little investment there.
No.
Sorry, I missed it.
Sorry, sorry, John. I was just going to say, well, this technically is a UK drone, but you've actually had to develop this in Turkey, really, haven't you? Correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah.
Well, you can't fly in the UK at this sort of scale without a lot of help from the regulator, and the regulator at the time just wouldn't have had the bandwidth for this. I mean, it just wouldn't have been possible. So we took the step to go overseas and develop it with a Turkish engineering company, and that's what you see. Although what you see there is without the the cruciform tail and without wings, because we didn't need those for the firing. The whole point was to fire from the hover to prove the autopilot behaviors in the hover, and the wings serve no purpose in the hover, as does the tail. So rather than have them damaged, because they're expensive.
And the chain there is merely a metaphor for the regulations.
In a way, I mean, we've got to be careful because, we've been throwing around the word autonomy and autonomous. Airliners don't fly autonomously; they fly with automatic flight, and the two are very different things. To my mind, autonomy is where the aircraft is part of the decision-making toolset or has decision-making built in, whereas automatic flight is pilots programming an aeroplane to fly, and flying one of these on an autopilot mission, that's automatic flight. That's not autonomous ops.
Right.
Autonomous ops for this will be multi-purpose machine learning, AI, deciding on where it's going to go, within reason. You'll give it a geographic area and off it will go to do a task, whatever that task may be. It might be delivering combat medicine, ammunition, water, or an effector like the LMM that you see there. So
effector. You and your sweet military talk.
Right, that's going to hurt somebody then.
I just saw somebody send a message about what I would say about how to handle the spoofing. And that I'd say, see my drafts in the Internet Engineering Task Force, in the DRIP work group, and how we have trustable remote ID and authenticated messages. Nobody can spoof them. These are messages that clearly identify who you are, and nobody else can pretend to be you. Whether we'll get full deployment of this, probably not. But this, for somebody who has reputable concerns, a delivery service, a UPS, a FedEx, an Amazon, whoever, doesn't want anybody else to pretend to be them. Oh, I'm FedEx, I'm really delivering drugs. Oh, I'm FedEx, I'm really delivering drugs. will move to this sort of technology where they cannot spoof. Then the next thing, like what Richard has shown, is that if you get the broadcast data, that this pretend guy says he's flying right in front of Buckingham Palace, 15 meters off the ground. No, it's tied to a dog's collar, and he's really 1 meter off the ground. So,
but you've arrived with these solutions late in the scene at the whole grid making table. I think. How are you going to convince?
I'm late to the game.
To change it? But how are you going to convince them to change it?
There's going to have to be some big things going wrong.
Okay.
Not until something big goes wrong, and finally the CA said, "Oh God, we got to fix this."
But isn't a natural kind of progression to have a terrible or a system that has terrible flaws in it? I won't call it a terrible system, but and then address those in an evolutionary fashion with encrypted remote ID or whatever, and off you go.
It'd be good though if there was some acknowledgement from the FAA that it does have issues at the start. I mean, they're actually specifically putting out on Twitter that remote ID doesn't give any personalized information, not grasping the fact that giving someone's geographic location is about as personal information as you can give. And I just think the information they give out, it makes them look naive and incompetent, because if you can't grasp that a geographic location is personal information, you know, you're thinking, who are the people behind it? It can't be that naive. So it's like they're either trying to pull the wool over people's eyes, or there is a level of incompetence to not have even considered that. I mean, I think we'll see what happens, but I know, like with GDPR here in the UK and in the EU and the UK to some extent, you know, information has been protected and seen as, you know, it's personal information, it shouldn't be given out. Now, whether that'll still remain true when we get RID implemented here will remain the same, but it is concerning that in the US, there just isn't quite the safeguards and quite switched on to the thought of this information here is personal.
It's interesting.
I need to go. I'm supposed to be in a meeting down in the conference. So it was good to talk to you people. Hope we can continue in the future. And I'll see you. Bye.
Good. Take care. Thanks very much.
Ian, on your point, the European Union, which has still informed the UK Information Commissioner's Office ever since Brexit, definition for personal data means any information relating to an identified or identifiable natural person, blah, 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 directly or indirectly, in particular an identifier such as a name, an identification number, location data, or an online identifier. So it's very clear, right? Location information is very, very personal. And the example we've given actually to our American friends many, many times when we speak about this is, well, if you have a person who is constantly flying from his or her back garden, which is where a lot of hobbyists will fly, right? You will infer that drone is seen at that location. Therefore, that drone is at that location. And if you watch who goes in and out of the house, you now combine those bits of information. But that's information that nobody should have, right? And I think the challenge is Robert's obviously not here now, so I won't talk too much about this. But I think one of the aspects of network remote ID, which I think is most concerning, is the notion that an authority should have some privileged access to it, because effectively that by any other means is weakening a cryptographic system to give one particular organization or many particular organizations privileged access. And if you follow the news, which I know you guys do, you'll currently be seeing the big tech giants, people like Apple, flat out refuse the recent amendments to the UK's quote unquote snoopers charter just on that grounds, where the UK want the ability to be able to frustrate that cryptographic process. And Apple have just turned around and said, well, if you do that, we will just pull out because we are not going to frustrate cryptographic security for an organization. And if you read between the lines, what they're actually saying is, how are you going to keep your keys safe? If I give you a master key, is Brent Police Force going to apply the same security as a company with a $1 trillion market cap? It probably isn't, right? So that, I think, is a really concerning element. But to start off by saying, well, we've got to start somewhere, so why don't we just broadcast the location of the thing we're worried about?
I know.
Kind of makes sense. I kind of get that.
Kind of.
But let's also broadcast the location of the organic person flying it. I don't know how we made that leap.
Well, I like
phone can pick it up, right?
I like the analogy of we always go to the normal car analogy, right? And remote ID. Oh, it's just the license plate. Well, if you apply the just a license plate thing to cars, then anybody with their key fob, the key fob location would be broadcast and available to anyone, just like the license plate is visible on the outside of the car. So, you can track your spouse and where they're going because you've got the little app that tracks the key fob, and nobody would allow that.
The key fob does something to respect your privacy. It doesn't do it deliberately, but it does it for security. It rolls the codes. Every time you press it, you get a different code, right? Remote ID is quite scary in that regard because it assigns the pilot and the drone the same code. So you just have to follow. You just have to listen for the same way. You have a network of broadcasters, which is actually proposed in some of these some of these papers. A whole bunch of us will have apps on our phones that will just listen and then throw together. You will then find that person or that identity that you're looking for cropping up. So at least have the courtesy to rotate those identifiers, right? And there is a process today for authorities to get access to a private company's registration information. It's called the court, right? You need to have a warrant, right? And people don't like that now. It's not cool to have the courts, right? And that's the whole purpose of Snoopers Charter, which is a very political topic I'm not trying to wade into, but insofar as that conversation might go and apply to drones, it doesn't seem to follow that an authority should just be able to query a vast database of pilots and their flights and their every flight that's taken place before and where they currently stood. That's an overstretch. A court would throw out that warrant request, right? And in fact, court has in the past thrown out warrant requests of very similar natures. So I just don't understand that the remote ID argument is there for the authorities. Because in that game, they're probably making it hard. The first time they request that information, surely a private company will contest that under information protection regulations. I just don't see that being entirely enforceable in its current guise.
Oh, okay, well, but let's look at a real world situation that just happened in Canada, where an idiot, and I put out a video about this. I called him Chad because it was an easy. Weird name not weird, but a name that you could identify.
There's Chads everywhere in one foul swoop. Yes.
You know what's funny is I said that I went parachuting for the first time on the weekend. Guess who was in the plane? There's five people in the plane. There was a goddamn Chad in the plane. I was like, oh my god. Anyway, so in Ottawa, so capital city of Canada, Ottawa. Chad flew his drone at the airport, like literally at the airport, but there was a drone detection system in place. So this is, much like, that everybody's talking about. They spotted the drone, and using the technology, which I don't think was any more clever than whatever it's called, Aeroscope. They located the pilot, and they went and they didn't arrest him, but they charged him with doing all sorts of stupid things, and he got fined $3,000. And myself, I think that's a good thing. So able for an enforcement organization to be able to locate that pilot who was doing something very, very bad, I think that was a good thing. And so how do we achieve that and yet not compromise everybody's freedom, I'll call it.
Well, yeah, and a lot of that though, and it also sort of alludes to what John was mentioning earlier about the UK now having you can go off and fly commercially. Although I disagree with you a little bit, John. I think you should be able to dip your toes in the water of the drone world at a low cost. and then move on up. But the bit that then would, so there's two ends of training missing here. So there's the leap. There is that leap from dipping your toes in the water to the other stuff, and then before that, before you get that first drone, there's a complete gap in really good training from wherever, I don't know, whatever, and the idea that people should at least have a little think about what they're doing before they go. And as an industry, I think we're failing in that little first welcome to drones. Here you are now. This is what you do.
Yeah.
But sorry, John, after you.
No, please. I didn't mean to interrupt you. Carry on.
No. But I was just going to say, and then at the same time, I am still astounded by the people that say, what's going to happen when that RAF jet hits my drone? Whose fault is it? Or why can't I fly over X, Y, or Z, or whatever it is? I'm astounded by people's lack of thoughts about what they're doing constantly. So maybe training isn't a solution. Anyway, sorry, John.
My point is that how do I get somebody from wanting to fly a drone and getting them to be flying a BVLOS aeroplane? The leap is too big, and the course is too long for that to be. The stride is too long to get across that chasm at the moment, and at the same time, we're not building up enough professional standards at the lower areas of the industry, and that consultation that's gone out, which has got a number of people's backs up. However, it makes total sense in most areas from where I'm sitting, because I need to have generated hundreds of pilots within a couple of years. That's impossible with the cadre of pilots that we have. And I agree with Bruce that we should be encouraging youngsters. People can't go up onto the flight deck of airliners anymore and become that little boy or girl who wants to be a pilot. They can't do that. They can do it at half time and they can do it when you land, but that's not the same thing. And so we need to get that spirit of aviation into youngsters. And the A2CFC is a great opportunity for that to happen. It's some training, but it's only theoretical. There's no skills-based stuff in it at all. And then going through to the GVC and beyond is a big step. And of course, it's a financial commitment that people think, well, I don't need to do that because I can do commercial operations where I am with an A2CFC, and they don't invest in themselves. Well, if you don't invest in yourself, don't expect too much success. Now, of course, there'll be some that will have success from that, but there'll be most that won't. And so how do we get somebody to go through those steps? Because they have to go through all of them to get to the end, to get to BVLOS, where the money will be, where there'll be opportunities for work on big platforms, autonomy, AI. It's an aspiration of the UK to be world leading in AI. Well, these vehicles are going to be where it's at. And, certainly our vehicle is. And so to get people into that, we need a progression through and a carrot, not a stick.
Yeah. Well, surely then one could say that things like a little bit more recognition for BMFA qualifications or select your model association wherever you are in the world, and then a little bit of continuity there wouldn't go amiss, would it? Well, okay, you've done your time, because certainly for me, if somebody wants to come and fly with us and the things we do, if they know how to operate a plastic bin bag for a model aircraft, then I instantly have and you'll bring me your photos of your crash airplanes. Perfect. That's what I want to see. I don't want to hear that you've been on a week's you've bought a drone from Best Buy and you've been on a week's course and now you're super qualified. Don't want to hear that.
No, you're absolutely true. That isn't right either.
I think part of the issue is it's money. It's the wages that are paid. If you look at it at the moment, if there's a company that's employing a pilot to fly at the moment, they're saying 20,000, 30,000. These are insulting wages. You could work in a call center and get paid more than being paid for someone to be a permie drone pilot, and that's the reality at the moment.
But we can't pay more because we're only allowed to fly for 3 months, and it takes 6 months to get approval to do it. So if you were to pay the right wages, you'd need to be flying all of the time. Oh, and by the way, on jobs that are highly lucrative, high yield, no competitors, and frequent. And
well, John, clearly you need to partner with a call center so that when they're not flying, they'll be gainfully employed.
OnlyFans is the way to go.
I mean, a lot of people that have been into drones have been so from, because they're the kind of techies, so they're in, they might be into IT and so on. And, the wages there are always better. And until that changes, all you're going to have is people that want to be self-employed where they can make enough money doing drone work, where it'll be, your roof inspections, your video, your so on. We need that step where, to be a BV loss pilot, there's the jobs there and the pay's there, and then people think actually that and then straight away you'll think that's the career I'm going for, and you'll be going.
I suppose it's hard to get excited. Well, you've been an Air Force pilot and then an airline pilot, John, so you've lived the dream that a lot of young ladies and chaps would like. But you could see when you started, you could see there was a couple. You didn't get the lightning, but there was a couple of paths there for you. So I suppose yes, and we are in the position where regulators aren't allowing people to do big proper trials of proper things that'll work to get us the usable data. We're in a chicken and egg situation, aren't we? We can't see it.
We're still in a research and development phase of an industry that should already be turning revenue product. And that's very disappointing. And by the way, you can't get investment particularly easily. There are, UKRI and other opportunities for investment. Quite often, it doesn't always invest in the direction of travel that you want to go in. So you probably have to angle off by 30 degrees and hope that some of that direction of travel is in some sort of direction that you want to go in. Oh, and then it's matched funding. So you're spending your money to not go in the direction you want to go. Well, that doesn't work. So either there's going to be a big shake-up in the UK of investment matched to opportunity, matched to regulation and permission, or we're not going to succeed. That's the end of that.
So something interesting that's happened in Canada is they've, there's a new pile of regulations that are in the proposal stage, and the biggest changes that they're proposing is directly addressing the kind of thing you're talking about, John, where it's so difficult to even develop a cargo drone in Canada because you can't fly it unless you have what we call here an SFOC, which is basically a short-term permit for a very specific operation. Well, the new regulations that are coming out are directly addressing that, saying, you know what, under these circumstances, you can in fact fly a very large drone as long as you have ticked these boxes, which may or may not be overboard, but it's basically taking that SFOC, the special permit, out of the equation. And it's both for heavy drones within visual line of sight, which of course is only for testing purposes, obviously, and then in very low risk environments of remote regions and stuff, well away from airports and people and all that, then BVLOS is being permitted as well. So they're trying to open the framework.
I don't care what the rules are. Just tell me what they are and I'll meet them. Just write them down so that we can follow them and we can all get cracking, and then we're good. And write them down in a way that makes sense and is consistent.
Yeah, and I think that's what they're trying to do here in Canada. Yeah, at least write down.
Time's going on a bit. I wanted to find out more about that Jackal. I'm going to put it up. Sure. I want to find out more about that their Jackal with that big shooty thing on it.
The colonoscopy drone.
The colonoscopy drone. So, John, you did start with a view to delivery drones, or did you actually start with a view to it'll be an armed thing?
I wanted a trainer.
Oh wow!
Believe it or not, this started life as a trainer, and we thought, well, if we're going to have a trainer, we might as well have a delivery drone that has got a purpose, so that we can train on something that's relevant. So we were visited in Turkey by the ambassador from the Comoros Islands, which is exactly, that's how I felt. So all that change is in the floor. And so we had an opportunity to ask them what would be an ideal drone. And of course, they need to move documents between islands in high temperatures, high winds that are separated by big oceans. And so we built Jackal to satisfy a leading particular from that.
You did say documents?
Documents,
Yeah, they go really
documents,
quickly in that
timing.
big silver tube. There they go. Yeah.
And so we built the Jackal to those requirements. But then the aeroplane is actually the wing that you can see there with the ducted fans, the 8 lift motors and the wing and the ducted fans. That is the aircraft, and that can fly on its own without a fuselage and without wings.
Oh, cool.
Okay, so it flies on its own. It can carry an underslung load, and you put different fuselages on, different wings, and different engines, and it can do different things. And that
So the top part is Thunderbird 2, and those things underneath are the pods. Got it.
Absolutely. Yeah, so that fuselage is just for that missile. Yeah.
The missile.
So obviously the aeroplane will have gimbals, and it'll have different sensors, and it'll have different technologies that obviously I won't be able to go into, but that wing can carry an underslung load, and on its third flight it carried a 35 kilogram underslung load, and that's what caught the attention of the Royal Air Force Rapid Capabilities Office, who asked us to start a discussion and what can we do, and can you do this? And I thought, well, if I'm going to go all of that way to do that, why don't I duff it up when I get there? Or can you do that? Well, let's have a look. And so we worked with Thales using an amazing missile called the LMM. And Thales Belfast is an incredible organization. They're not a large prime that devours and eats their young. They really lent into the problem and said, right, how can we help? And really did. And we went from 6 weeks. We built those 2 aircraft, flew them, tested them, got them to where the firing took place, and integrated 2 missiles and fired all in 6 weeks. That would normally take 2 years.
So this is real. Like this thing firing, the missile is real.
Yeah,
the aircraft is real, and it actually fired.
Yeah, fired 2 missiles.
Out of interest, is this RG Pilot and Cube based?
I can't possibly say, but no.
Can't possibly say.
What we all
Does it
know
use-
is what were you firing at? That's the real question.
Yeah, does it use remote ID as a homing signal?
This test was a test to see that the conditions surrounding the vehicle and the autopilot behaviors could survive firing of this missile. So
it's a
it was
recoilless
just
setup.
a dumb missile being fired, but it had the same rocket motor and all of the rest. So it was a trial to prove that it can be done. And now, obviously, we've gone a lot further. This was well over 6 months ago now. So obviously,
now,
the platform's changed markedly.
how far back did you stand?
Well, this was an interesting point of leadership, really. We only could carry so many personnel near the firing, and I wasn't there. I was 750 meters away, and I heard it.
Leading from behind. Excellent.
Leading from behind, yes. So there were people there that had worked harder, I thought, and had been on the project and needed to see it. That's what video is for. I can see the video. So even though it was my project, I thought it would be better for those that needed to see it, and they can tell me all about it when I get nearer.
And you might not be able to answer this, but then has this made lots of grown-ups in the RAF have long, hard thinks about where this might go then?
Well, it appeared in the Defence Command Paper 2023, 4 or 5 days ago, which is the Defence White Paper. It's the future of defence. It appeared in that. It's just appeared in the Air Power book from, again, 2023. So that describes how combat is going. So it's a stepping stone to other things, perhaps, but if we're here already, let's make the most of the opportunity. What other British opportunities are there? We need to, you know, the IP is now resident British. We still intend to work with our Turkish partners because Turkey is a drone superpower. And, you know, I've got a range there, 53 kilometers by 13 kilometers. I can fly whenever I want, in any condition, and do anything.
So,
and the person I have to ask permission
you might not want to answer this. So why can't you just turn up at Larkhill or turn up at Aberporth and get in and go? What's stopping you doing that?
Well, a whole bunch of regulations saying that it's over 25 kilograms. It needs an OSC to fly.
Even in the ranges,
it was to have no weapons on it. Sorry.
Does it not have it's not flying under military authorization or anything like that then?
No, at the moment it won't fly again in the UK now until all of that is definitely in place, because it's just not the right thing to do. You know, you have to follow those regulations. Remember, this was a secret program. We had to get things done in a hurry, and there actually is no rule set covering this, but you shouldn't sit there for too long. Yeah, if you're in a crack in the pavement, that's not a good thing. That's a bad thing. You need to use the opportunity, demonstrate, get out, get everything in order, get everything ready, and move forward with those people. So that, I mean, this was a secret program. There's nothing else we could do at the time, and we had very tight time pressures. But of course, it could all have been done in Turkey. It just wasn't. But you know, if the UK wants testing of that sort of level and the future levels of autonomy, then we have to get to it. We have to get around a table, all sides, and thrash out what those rule sets are going to be. And you know, that isn't for me to write. That's for me to obey.
Again, sensible. No, it's a fantastic looking platform, and I'm sure the beans, bullets, and bandages version will be very popular as well. I mean, it's got to be a huge use case in the military.
Well,
I know we're looking at
the aim of the aeroplane is the threat of the aircraft. It's not what it's doing; it's what it could do to you that will modify your behavior so that you don't want to meet this. You really do not want to be in the open when this gets anywhere within 5 kilometers of you. It will find you and it will duff you up.
So the primary use case is to quote unquote duff people up, not to do the, what was the brilliant line there? Bullets, beans, and bandages?
Bandages, yeah. Well, that's the thing that, you know, the military runs on. I mean, it's all very well having fiery things, but you've got to eat and all those other things. So I'm sure there's going to be the big development in reasonably sized, let's say up to 100 kilo carrying of stuff for the military. I'm sure it's going to move it on.
I mean, it can land. You put a new fuselage on it. It can go forward again with food. Or you can put emitters on it, or you can put, you know, receivers on it. It's all sorts to all people. However, let's not forget, you've got at some point to get stuck in, and there's nothing better than having an aeroplane that can be risked at a cheap price point that stops you having to use platforms with people in. They can be used in far better ways. And the other thing is we can hand this off to somebody else because it's easy to fly. So we can just fly it along, and then somebody says, oh, I need some power over here. and you hand it to them, they use it and give it back, and then we can give it to somebody else to use. So it's very intuitive, and people can log into it, use the capability, and hand it back to somebody else.
Far too much fun.
Oh, that's interesting.
Far too much.
So you're keeping it sat on the ground ready then, with appropriate people able to bring it into effect somewhere.
Well, there's all sorts of things you can do with it. I mean, we can think up a lot of things because we're all weapons instructors and, you know, have been in combat. But those that are out there at the moment, what better way of finding out what it can do than to give it to somebody to use? You don't have to write all of the doctrine down when you're using cheap things. I mean, you don't have an instruction manual for a hammer.
Oh, really?
I bet you do. I bet you do somewhere.
You give it to somebody and they come up with all different uses for it. Some of them good, some of them bad.
It's a screwdriver. It's a this. It's a that. It's whatever you need it to be. It's well, because you say, because you were a qualified weapons instructor on 208, I think, weren't you? As well as going to the college. So and your company has people of that skill set within it.
I was a qualified weapons instructor on the Hawk and the Sea Harrier with the Navy off HMS Invincible and Ark Royal.
Very cool.
Gosh. I
have a question for you, John. Is it fun to blow stuff up? Is it as fun as I imagine it to be? Let me go with that.
I blow up balloons and they're fun.
Well, do you want to see my war face?
Go on then.
Yes, it is. But remember, you're always a bit frightened, but the thing to remember is you're not as frightened as the people you're going to visit.
Cool.
But you don't always have to war to blow stuff up, though, do you? I mean, you can go off and hit Garvey Island, lots and other stuff places, and you make big bangs.
I remember the training is it's all about training. It's being better tomorrow than you were today. What went well? Why did it go well? How do you do more of that? It's not learning from your mistakes, because high performers don't make many, so you learn at a slow rate. You've got to get learning from your successes, and if you don't do that, then you've missed all those opportunities.
No, amazing stuff. Look, we've had we've gone to an hour and 46 with almost without taking a breath, and Bruce took the reins. So we need to revisit this again. It's a very level-headed conversation, was it? At least we know somebody now. We know Robert, who is in the room with ICAO and the FAA for their meetings. So we know someone that's in that room now. So that'd be nice if we could direct us some more. And we haven't really talked to Richard enough about. In fact, no, we should have another little chat with Richard before we go. For your proposed system, or your system that's rolling out. When can I look at some screens and dob in a load of GA pilots cutting corners around controlled airspace? When are you going to let us do that? Can't we have a Saturday afternoon doing that with beers? And we can sit.
We're going to give out logins for people to just have.
Of course you will. Of course you will.
Are you referring to the surveillance element or the Skyway system overall? So the surveillance system will be done probably October timeframe. So that's the one that's going to give us about 300 linear kilometers by about 50 or 60 kilometers, give or take geography, of what we would say pretty good coverage. You have to make from that what you will in terms of what that will pick up, but we are going to go out and test it, right? We're going to field test this stuff with GA flying known circuits, known patterns, various different aircraft in different configurations, and prove the efficacy of it. We've got a couple of airfields which are participating, very, very happily with us, using their, if you like, their customers, their members, their pilots, to go out and do cool things. We've got one military organization interested as well, which will be an interesting one because they tend to fly things that are much more fun than a Piper. And not that I have anything against Piper pilots, just to be honest, but something that travels really fast is just a little bit more fun. So it's trying to spot those, and actually the real focus there is those things do tend to move a lot more quickly than any other things in the sky, and the speed equation is very important to us. So the earlier we can detect it, the more likely we are to be able to move something else out of its way. But when it's traveling really fast, it can potentially negate a lot of that. So it's how far out can we see this? How many of these sensors do we need to see in order to protect this little thing moving down the middle? Because again, to your point earlier, John, I think you called it out rather nicely. A little drone isn't really much of a threat to something like a tornado, right? But the other way around, it's definitely true. And it might not be important to the tornado pilot, but it might be carrying some medical samples that are quite important to some patients on the ground. So, us having that kind of sensor range is really, really key. So yeah, that's the exciting thing that's happening now. I suppose the other bit would just be to call out that we haven't gone off and bought a load of ping stations, for instance. Not that there's anything wrong with those, but we haven't gone out and just gone and bought some of these sort of more commercial devices. We've gone out to some very specific software-defined radio manufacturers with very strong, very robust aviation and maritime heritage. We've given them some instructions about the type of things, the type of conditions they're likely to find, type of things we're interested in, and they've gone off and done all sorts of radiometric topographic surveys of our deployment locations. And we've very, very specifically, when we put in the press release, we've built this for very low altitude detections. We're talking sub 1,000 feet, which is awful, particularly in an urban environment. So when you layer in all these other systems that go with it, it's been an awful lot of labor. So the only reason to do all that, principally for us, is to enable that piece of the pie, which hopefully gets more people flying BVLOS automated, right? And we're talking commercial users here. It's nothing to do with hobbyists. Won't be affected by the technology we're deploying. What we're hoping to do is to use that as an accelerant, so that operators can sort of delete. I think it's volume 2 in the OSC. System. But the problem is there won't be much of a change to the rest of the process. So, you still have to apply to become an operator with the CAA. You still have to prove that you've got an airworthy airframe. You have to do all the other good stuff that should be done in terms of how do you separate yourself from other people that are conspicuous or otherwise, manned or otherwise. We are hoping that we can demonstrate now through the testing phase that the quality of this coverage that we have, combined with the navigation system we've built, is sufficient to get that small drone or that hopefully larger drone over longer distances with less effort from, and ultimately less people, right? From certainly on the customer side, people that want to operate drones for commercial gain. If you're delivery company. And I'm not talking about Amazon to your house, by the way. I still think that's a mad idea. I'm talking middle mile logistics between airports with some very big money behind it, with some of the biggest logistics companies in the world. Even these guys can't do it, right? And they're already an airline in some instances. They're operating between airports, can't fly a drone though. So it's how do we accelerate all of that? That's why we put that much effort in. So yeah, that's the public news. There's more news coming tomorrow, which is sort of related but unrelated to Skyway, which is going to be
it's tomorrow here now. You can tell us it's tomorrow here now.
In 7 minutes it's tomorrow here.
You can tell me because it's tomorrow in New
It's
Zealand.
tomorrow where you are, isn't it? Yeah.
It's October.
Tom's guys watching, he's probably going to get upset now, but in 7 minutes it comes out of sort of embargo anyway, and everyone gets the news tomorrow. Every single airport in the UK tomorrow morning will receive an email from Altitude Angel telling it that it's gone online to our UTM system.
Wow.
And out of
How did you find about
2/3 of all UK airports publish as an official mechanism for receiving an approval to fly in an FRZ via email. But the problem is almost all of them have different processes to everyone else. 1/3 of airports don't publish any form of communication at all other than a telephone number or a fax, literally a fax machine in some instances. So what we're doing tomorrow is we're launching what we call our UTM Ready program, and that will categorize every single airport in the UK as a level 0, or a legacy airport, a level 1, or a basic airport, or a level 2, which will be a UTM Ready airport. and 66-ish% of UK airports will go straight in at level 1 because they've got this email system. And what Guardian will do, which is sort of technology that sits behind Drone Assist, Drone Safety Map, and all of our APIs, is it will take a flight report from there through whatever mechanism people are already filing it. And if you use, there's a whole bunch of other drone flight planning apps that people use. Mission Planner is also one of, GCS, which has got it integrated. We will work out that you need to get that permission, and we will instantaneously convert that into a nice PDF for the airport that can't do digital approvals. And we will send that to the airport for you, CC you into it so that you can continue your offline approval with the airport. But alongside that, we'll be trying to encourage the airport to actually go that little step further and at least start to engage in the digital approvals as well. So it's kind of we've heard enough now from hundreds of thousands of pilots in the UK that are just frustrated trying to get access, and airports don't have more reasonable means to deal with it in the most cases. They don't have budgets for this kind of stuff. So we said, okay, well, we'll try and blend the two worlds initially, and we'll put together the UTM ready program so that airports that want to walk the walk can, and they can start to deploy a compatible UTM. So it doesn't have to be ours, but it does have to offer the capabilities that our back end does, which is to get to the point where the airport can do full end-to-end digital communications with an operator and can start to approach automated decisions for approval. So for instance, they could say, oh, I've seen Ian before. He's flown here 10 times. He's got a 100% success record. He's also flying 2 nautical miles to the south of the runway or parallel to the runway, where my rules say it's completely fine. I'll just pre-approve it. So off we go.
There we are. That's a good question for that, Rich.
How is what going to be funded? What the airports are doing or what we're doing? If it's us, then anyone who uses our platform already knows that they don't pay to file a request. Airports today won't have to pay to go on to level 0, which is the legacy phase, which is basically no change to them. Level 1, which is where we're effectively gifting them all of the first stage approvals. Level 2, you either need a UTM from us, you need to build your own UTM, or you buy someone else's that can connect into it. There are various costs associated with each of those, but ours starts at a couple of $100.
Is Altruism Angel, is that registered as a charity?
No, but it's one of the many misspellings I'm sure we've registered somewhere. Altitude Angle is the worst one, and I catch people in the company doing it on a number of occasions. Yeah, so it's worth also pointing out there are some airports in the UK that have gone the full hog and they're already at UTM ready phase 2. Those are airports, or in some instances heliports, which are already charging for commercial drone operations today. They will fund their use of the system through that charge, so there should be no additional charge to drone operators that are already paying. So, again, our goal there was not to affect the very community we're trying to support. And actually, we have 2 communities to support. We have airports who have infrastructure to run, and they don't have a lot of money to welcome this new kind of drone traffic. But we also have drone pilots who need to get off the ground, need to fly, and they quite often need to fly in that, rich, juicy, quote unquote, airspace that is protected under an airport, right? And that's where we have infrastructure that's worth visiting, surveying, delivering at, taking off from, etc. So the platform will do this, and over the next 3 months, we'll then start rolling that out across all of the EU as well. So that's an exciting.
Wow.
I think that's an exciting thing. We'll see how that goes. I'm sure other people might have other opinions, but I look forward to them.
Party at Richard's place.
And just for me, that 300 kilometers, is that along your proposed corridors? Is it, are you centering
it's
up?
Slightly longer, actually. The proposed corridor is a factor of the sensor detection radius that we have, but then we apply an enormous margin of error onto that, right? So although we would be very confident, for argument's sake, say radio reception range out to 30 or 40 kilometers from a transmitter, it's not that. Just for big numbers, for an example's sake, we might restrict the flight in that zone to 2 or 3 kilometers across, so that we know that if you're down the center line, we're going to see everything within a reasonable margin from you. So the surveillance network is naturally a bit broader than that, because obviously we want to reach out and see what's approaching that or what's transiting that. So those are for the fixed assets,
Yes.
and then we now have 7 mobile assets in the UK as well, which are going to various locations to ultimately contribute towards the testing.
Yes, because if something's bearing down on it at 6 or 7 miles a minute, then you do need to have quite a range outside of your 2 mile wide corridor. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's rare so far in our current testing where we've seen anything that's below 400 feet and traveling at that speed. But it's not even possible.
You must put it up in the Mac loop. Do the Mac loop. That'd be great. Get it up in the
This
Mac
is the
loop.
worst
like
place
that.
for a highway system to exist. Is right there.
Yeah,
in that
well, it
Mac
would
loop.
be. Yeah, but
But it would also be
it'd
the
be fun
funnest,
for all the
right?
spotters on the hill.
Yeah.
All right,
So,
look, we're definitely. I'm rabbiting and ranting. Oh, if I do this quickly, we can do 2 hours on the now. Dear viewer, wherever you're in the world, thank you very much for watching. Guests, thank you. It's been fantastic. We'll see you again, 2100 GMT next week. Cheers, everybody. Look after yourself.